every dollar really needs to go far. But the trade-off is that if this startup is really successful, the type of equity that people are going to receive could be, life-changing. People really underestimate how hard it can be at times. Create something from nothing or create something more from very little.
Today, I have the honor of welcoming back my friend of the show, Kevin Reich, to learn about what it's like to work as the director of finance and director of accounting for Fox Robotics, a startup in Austin. Kevin, welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Joaquin. It's great to be back. Looking forward to talking with you again.
Absolutely. And Kevin, I know we usually do use the icebreakers, for most of our episodes. If you don't mind running through them again.
Yeah, let's do it.
And then for this, I guess we can do it for this position, right? So, and maybe we can incorporate a little bit of what Fox Robotics actually is in the icebreaker, right? So, in your own words, what do you do? Where do you live? So, where are you guys based out of? And as a kid, what did you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can speak first about my role at Fox Robotics. I think the easiest way to sum that up is I wear many, many hats. And basically anything that's related to money at Fox, I'll probably have some involvement with it, whether it be, billing and collecting cash from our customers, paying our vendors, taking care of payroll with our employees, all the way up to, stewarding and managing the cash that we have well. Um, all of those types of things I'm involved with to some degree. So I lead a small finance and accounting team to get those things done. So I live in Austin, Texas, although originally from Minneapolis, Minnesota. And as a kid, I really wanted to play professional sports of some sort. And then my dad was a truck driver. I thought that was really cool. So I wanted to be a truck driver as well. Did not know what an accountant was or what finance was at that point, but found my way into it.
Gotcha. And how long have you been working with Fox Robotics?
I've been with Fox since September of last year, so approximately 6 months, give or take, which startups are kind of like dog years. If you're there for a
Yeah.
year, it's 3 years anywhere else. So it feels like a long time. A lot has changed, but it's only been less than a year.
Yeah. And so, Kevin, tell us a little bit more about the path to get to the startup, right? So, what made you get into it in the first place, and how did you first get your start?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my career in Minnesota. I was at Deloitte in public accounting, and I really enjoyed my time there. And some of my favorite clients were actually startup companies, that they were companies that needed a financial statement audit. They were going through their first one, and that's how I was introduced to them. And they were really, really fun clients to work for because they were on the cutting edge of, whatever industry they were in, whether it be manufacturing or tech or healthcare or, yeah, I was able to see a number of different ones. I thought they were the coolest. And so when I moved from Minnesota to Texas, I wanted to move to a city where I knew that there was a lot of startup activity, and Austin just really stood out. And this was my dream job. Like this was the job that I was looking for. I had a little pit stop on the way um, from moving to finding this role, but yeah, it's really the job that I wanted. So as I said, this was the dream job. It was the job I was looking for. I was working for a different great company at the time, but it was a larger Fortune 500 tech company, which is
Hmm.
very, very different. And I knew that at some point I was going to move into a startup type role. And so in my case, I actually wasn't looking for anything, but I did have a recruiter reach out to me with a great opportunity, a classic recruiter email of, hey, hot startup needs new, director of finance, director of accounting. So I figured it wouldn't hurt to have a conversation. And I was absolutely right that one conversation led to another, and I was able to land the role at Fox. So I've just really, really enjoyed doing something that was very different for me, that I had always seen it from the outside looking in, but to be able to be on the inside of a startup company is just really, really fascinating.
Absolutely. Yeah. And are there certain degrees or certifications that you need to get, kind of a finance or accounting position within a startup?
There's a lot that can help. I would say that there's nothing necessarily that I guess it depends on the role. But for example, to be on the finance team, yeah, one thing that's really cool about startups is they're very open-ended. If you're willing to work hard, if you're sharp, and willing to work with others, like there's a great chance that you can find a startup role because they're just looking for great people, even if they might not be the most experienced. And so specifically within the finance and accounting team, generally when we're hiring, we are looking for people that have, a strong finance or accounting background. A CPA, certified public accounting designation absolutely helps, but it's usually not a prerequisite for the position. And then other things that help people stand out is, if they've been in, startup company before or a startup experience, just because they're so unique compared to, what another type of company would be like. And I'm happy to go further into that if you want.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you may, I think, just let us know maybe like within your team and maybe like within your knowing of other startups as well, like where people come in terms of like what backgrounds, right? Like where, especially for like the finance and more like accounting roles and kind of like business numbers. Like tell us like where do you see people coming from startups? Is it usually out of college as well, since like you want, like fresher minds and maybe, maybe not that expensive hires?
I'd say it's all the above. There's definitely a need for people that have done it before or that have great experience, whether that be at a startup company or at a really great company that's larger. One advantage of a startup company is usually you're able to grow with the company, and that if you get into a role 6 months or 12 months or 2 years after starting, that role may be completely different if the startup is successful and continues to grow. And so we'll have people, as I mentioned, from maybe they're from public accounting like myself. They could be from other larger companies. They can absolutely be right out of college. Like if you're in college right now and are like, yeah, I want to be, part of the next big company, whatever that may be, absolutely feel free to look at startups in the area. It's a great place to have exposure to management, to learn on the fly, to be in a very like fun, dynamic, and changing environment. So yeah, there's a lot of different entry points to be able to start at a startup.
Yeah, and tell me, what does a day in the life look like for you? What time do you start? What time do you end? Are you doing remote kind of hybrid models, or are you mostly in meetings with other people?
A day in the life is very different from one day to the next. I think one thing that is consistent, I do have more of a hybrid role where sometimes I'll go in person just because it's great to interact with the team and other folks at the company. And given we're so small, I'm able to get to know all of my coworkers very well. Like we all sit in the lunchroom together, and I feel like I've gotten to know, our company is approximately 100 people. And so
Hmm.
given that size, I'm able to get to know most of the people there and get to know some folks very well, which, at a larger company, being in an accounting background, I might not interact with somebody, outside of the accounting or finance team. So that's been really cool. Um, so, I'll generally start at a normal, 8 to 5 timeline, but there can absolutely be variability in that if we're doing a larger push to get a project done or something like that, hours might be later. But, for the most part, I'd say it's a typical, 8 to 5. Some nights are later. And then during the day, some days are, very focused work of, I have a hard problem I'm trying to solve or a project that I'm working on or whatever the case may be. Other days I might be in meetings all day talking with, our customers or our vendors or our leadership team or,
Hmm.
my team, just to try and solve a problem. So there's a lot of change, which I like. I really love it about the job that each day is different. It never feels old or stale. And there's always something new that I'm learning or being challenged in, which is great.
Yeah, and what specific tasks do you think you spend majority of your day doing for your specific role?
I'd say there's a normal cadence, and this is common not just in startups, but across any organization, is there's usually a cadence of call it every month or every quarter of, within accounting, we call it the concept of like closing the books, where essentially,
Yeah.
like say at the end of the year, December 31st rolls around, fiscal year is over. That's when the accounting team is going to be very busy of putting together, how do we do as a business? How much money did we make? How much cash did we bring in? How much cash went out? And pulling together all these different reports so that our leadership team can understand what happened. They can see the narrative and story of our company over whatever time period, and then make decisions from that. So even at the end of the month, we'll have a normal process where call it the first week or two of the month is very defined of just our team working through what needs to be done, putting those reports together,
Hmm.
and really it's that call it later 2/3 of every month where it's very open-ended as far as what we may be working on, whether it's putting a new accounting system in place or working with a new vendor. Maybe there's a new initiative that someone else in the company, like if they want new manufacturing data or they want to see
Mm,
pricing for different things, like there are a wide variety of different projects that we can work on to really help our company be successful and to be a part of that.
gotcha. And as a director of finance, director of accounting, what tools, technologies do you use mostly?
I would say that within our tech stack, there's a suite of basically anything that's dealing with money. So we'll have, an ERP system that we work with that's tracking, our financial statements, all accounting activity in and out. We have a corporate, credit card and bill paying system that we work with. Um, there's a bank that we're managing the money. We're taking care of our cash, which is very
Mm,
important. You don't
yeah,
want your cash to walk away. You want to make sure that there are good safeguards over that, as well as just, using whatever systems our customers use to bill them and to pay our vendors and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of the day to day is just, working with money, going in and going out and making sure that everything gets where it needs to, it's being reported accurately, and that we're being, very responsible and having good controls to mitigate risk.
gotcha. And tell me, what parts of your job are most exciting and interesting to you?
I think for me, and this applies even beyond the realm of finance and accounting, but I just really, really love working with teams and building things. And so while you can build something at any company, especially at a startup, you have opportunities all the time of like, hey, we don't have this process yet, or we don't have this system, or can you put this new one in place? There have been so many things that I've done over the last 6 months of just continuing to grow the organization, continuing to scale it, and especially given my prior experience at public accounting and working for a Fortune 500 company,
Yeah,
I learned how to do things very, very well of like, here's what A plus looks like. And so being able to bring that skill set into a smaller startup company and to be able to build a lot of that from scratch is super, super cool. And to have people, on our leadership team, look to me for, advice or, how are we doing or where are things at? It's a really great experience.
absolutely. And what parts of the job, maybe again, as like a startup or maybe sometimes harder or emotionally challenging or boring for you?
I think a classic startup one is just not having enough resources or not having enough people to get things done. And so there might be times where, yeah, you feel stretched a little bit more thin because you're doing so many things, or especially it, if you're a person that can't handle change very well, I would say a startup company is probably not a great fit. But if you like change and thrive in that, it's a great place to be. And so those are things that can be tough is, just bandwidth as well as, there's just a lot of things that haven't been done before and need to be done. So it might be trying to figure out something from scratch. And so in that case, it's drawing on prior experience or calling a friend to ask them what they did. It's a lot of dealing with things that you haven't seen before and don't know the answer to when you start on it.
Absolutely. And are you able to, kind of leave I know you work in a hybrid model, but are you able to leave, most of your work at the office or in terms of like a certain time frame, or do you maybe work after hours a little bit at home?
Sometimes there's after hours. It really depends on the team, and what I can say too is, yeah, our team has established a very good culture of, hey, we have a lot to do. Like, make sure that you can get your work done, like work during the business day. But there's also some flexibility in, when you get that done or working on the time frame. Like, because our teams are so small and bandwidth is limited, it's not
Hmm.
like there's a lot of micromanagement. Like we very much hire for people that can be autonomous. And if, folks like working on their own and are able to get a high level task and just run with it,
Yeah,
like those are the type of people that we're looking for because those are the type of people that are going to get things done and do a great job.
absolutely. And would you say for most, I guess generally, I mean, you're in the middle of, you're in Austin, right? Like there's a
Mhm.
lot of startups going around. And
Yeah.
would you say for the startup world in general, are there a lot of flexible hours, and then are there like remote hybrid models, or does it kind of depend on the industry and obviously the company?
I would say it depends, but if you're looking for it, you can absolutely find it. My sense is most startups, and not just startups, but companies in general, are moving back to more of a hybrid or at least in-person model because there's just so many things that organically happen if you're
Yeah.
bumping into somebody in the hallway. Or in our case, I share, a room that our office is in with a bunch of different people. So like just the conversations that I get to interact with, like I
Yeah.
don't have that if I'm working at home. The difference is when I'm here, it's very quiet. I can get a lot of things done. Like I can
Yeah.
focus very well. So there's definitely trade-offs in place.
Yeah. And based on the nature of what Fox Robotics does, right? Are there any busy seasons to this job? And if so, which parts of the year are probably busiest for you guys?
Yeah, I would say there are sprints. I don't know if it's necessarily set by the calendar as much as it is. Yeah, the cool thing about startups is there's usually one, you know, overarching initiative or thing that like the entire company is working on. So it's really cool when we're meeting as a company and talking about like, hey, what's our product roadmap right now? How are we tracking towards these objectives? And everybody is laser focused on, that handful of things or whatever it may be. Um, and so, once we hit those milestones or, whatever that case is, we're moving on to the next one. We're trying to get better. We're trying to grow fast. Um, and I think one thing that's really unique about startups, and it was fascinating at my previous company, it was led by the CEO was the founder of the company, and he was also, now a Fortune 500 CEO. And it was fascinating listening to him that, somebody had asked him, what did you think was going to happen with this company? And he said, honestly, like I just went with the statistics. I thought we were going to fail. And I think that's one thing that anyone that's considering a startup should be very mindful of is statistically, if you look at probability, over half of startups are going to fail. They're going to go out of business. They're not going to make it, whatever the case may be.
Hmm.
There's, maybe a smaller percentage, call it 30%, that they do okay. They make it. They'll have some sort of successful exit. They'll get bought out. And then there's a small percentage that become absolutely fantastically like
Yeah.
life-changing successful. And these are, companies that, maybe everyone's heard of, whether it be, like Facebook, Meta, Google, NVIDIA is a big one right now that, at some point 10, 20 years ago, these were all startup companies that likely started in somebody's garage or, in a small office somewhere and have just grown into something incredible. So it's cool to be at the front end and
Yeah.
watch that change happen and go along for the ride.
Yeah. From when went into now, how much have you guys grown in terms of maybe like number of employees or just like market cap?
Yeah, market cap I can't talk about as much publicly, but I'll just say like we've grown a
Yeah.
lot, and especially even from employees, I'd say, within 6 months, our organization's probably grown like 50%, and that
Wow.
growth is continuing. And I would say that that is common for many startups is that like if you look at revenue, if you look at cash, if you look at, employees, it's like a high rate of change and growth, and that it might be doubling for a period of years or tripling or whatever the case may be. And so it's just wild, even when you talk with people that were there at the beginning of like, oh, like maybe it was only 10 people and now it's, you get 20 people, it's double, and then you just keep doubling from there. There's always a ton of change that's happening.
Yeah. And I think that's a good leeway, Kevin, into my next question, which is tell me, what do people underestimate about a startup? Maybe also a little bit more towards like the business side of a startup. You manage a lot of money, right? You manage a lot of accounts. What's something that people might underestimate?
I think one thing people underestimate is there's certain people that start and all they see are like dollar signs, or they just imagine like what the color of their yacht is going to be, right? And they like think of these super successful companies that, there's a chance that you can make it. But as I mentioned, a lot of startups don't. And so I think people really underestimate how hard it can be at times to like create something from nothing or create something more from very little. And so people really underestimate, what can be happen or, how hard it is. I've heard it described. I think I was listening to a podcast where somebody said every startup is broken. It's just the ones that are less broken are the ones that make it. So
Hmm.
people really underestimate how much work there is to do and, how hard it is to start a company and scale it up.
Absolutely. And I mean, you and I talked a little bit about in our first episode, which was kind of around more of public accounting. And we were talking about how public accounting is kind of like the, cardiovascular system of a company, right? You
Mhm.
you mentioned cash flows today as well. It's important to have, money to keep the company going, even if you have like good revenue projections or you have a lot of incoming revenue. So, what's something that people might overestimate about this job in on the other side?
Sometimes people can definitely overestimate, that uncertainty. But at the same time, there's still core elements of a business that are there. And there's still things that any startup company, you have to have your table stakes or your basic building blocks. I've heard it also described as like you're trying to build a car while you're driving it. You've
Mm,
got this very basic car, it's going
yeah,
down the road, and then while it's driving, you're putting a new engine in it, or you're putting a new coat of paint on, or putting new tires, or whatever the case may be. So you still have to keep the car moving forward,
yeah.
but at the same time, you've got to get more horsepower and you've got to get a cooler car to get where you need to go.
That's an awesome analogy. I love that. I think that made a lot of sense for me, to know kind of what a startup is.
Mhm.
And Kevin, tell me, like, if let's just say I'm like, I love the grind of a startup. Like, I love, just kind of like being a part of something that, has a lot of growth potential. What is the fastest way for me to get in there? Right? Especially if I'm coming from a non-traditional background, maybe I'm working in another type of industry, and I just need to get my foot in the door. Who do I need to reach out to? How do I need to reach out?
Yeah, I think if you're a college hire, it's taking, whatever you've learned or whatever background you have. And as I mentioned, startups are always looking for great people, and their expectations about past experience can be lower than, maybe at a more traditional or larger company. And so if that's your situation, you have a great opportunity to just reach out and ask if you can, get coffee with somebody at the company or just talk about their business. So that's one. Or another is if you have, great experience into whatever that startup is doing. Like in my case, I had a really strong finance and accounting background, so I'm able to provide that to the organization.
Yeah,
But, we have a lot of really fantastic and smart engineers. And so like they're able to provide a lot of value. And there's a lot of other people as well that had great experience here in Austin, whether it be one of the larger companies like Tesla or Facebook or whatever, and they're able to bring that great experience into Fox.
absolutely. And Kevin, tell me, for this particular startup, for Fox Robotics, what other fields are people coming from? Obviously, you have a finance and a very heavy accounting background. Tell me a little bit more about your coworkers, right? Before getting into this profession with Fox, what are some of the things that they did as well?
Yeah, I'd say at the very beginning, and which is still the case now, is we have a lot of engineers. If you think so, what Fox Robotics does is we do autonomous forklifts, which are really cool because you can walk out into our warehouse and you have these forklifts that are moving pallets around without a driver. And so we have a lot of engineers that are, maybe autonomy or perception. If you think of like a self-driving car, it's a similar technology that's in our self-driving forklift. The forklift has to understand where it is in its environment. It has to understand its objectives and how it's getting those things done. So we have a lot of engineers that are, writing the code so that the forklifts can
Yeah.
navigate its environment. On the other side, though, besides the software end of things, is we also have hardware that we have a large piece of industrial equipment
Hmm.
that we need to outfit to run autonomously, whether it has, the sensors so that it can navigate its environment, or the hardware and the computer attached to it, if it has the right components so that it can operate autonomously. And so, as I mentioned, a lot of engineers. The other side of it as we continue to grow as a company is we have a large fleet of, now these robotic forklifts that are out there. So we also have a great team of, people that are out in the field servicing them, helping deploy them at our customers. And then a thing that's often overlooked, and within the United States, we don't have as many manufacturing companies, but I think a lot of smart manufacturing is coming back. Is Elon Musk was quoted on a podcast saying there's all these great movies about entrepreneurs that have great ideas, and the movie is about them or their idea and launching it. So there needs to be more great movies about manufacturing and just how hard it is to build something. And like
Mm,
building something at scale and manufacturing something is way harder than having the initial idea and getting it to work. And so at Fox, we also have a lot of great people that are, able to scale up our production of, how do we go from, making a very small number of, call it prototypes or more, earlier stage models to, how can we have a great product at scale and, be able to deliver and deploy, many, many times of these units to our customers.
That's an absolutely, very insightful point, Kevin. And what does somebody have to be good at and like doing in order to be fit or be good for a startup? Like, what has to come easily to you, in your opinion?
Probably the number one thing is people need to be really good at dealing with ambiguity or being in ambiguous environments with lots of change. So if you're the person that thrives in not having a roadmap forward or having to make your own, it's a great, great way to be successful is just to do that. I think another great characteristic that people, if you're able to be autonomous and just work well on your own, have responsibility, have discipline, and are really excited about building new things or making existing things way better, a startup is a really, really great environment to use those natural skills.
Gotcha. And in your opinion, how long does it take for someone to get used to the startup life, right? Like how long does it take for somebody to get really good at whatever their position might be? And really good might be just really good at dealing with change, right?
Yeah, I think people that make it and do really good, they find out within the first few weeks, and people that aren't able to make it, they also find out within the first few weeks, and that they're just not a good fit for it and not going to make it because the environment is very, very demanding. But yeah, for people that love it, like they absolutely love it, and they for a lot of people, once they work for a startup, they can't see themselves working for any other type of company.
Awesome. And are there promotion paths in within maybe Fox Robotics, but broadly, obviously, startups as well, from the entry to maybe like the highest position you can hold? You kind of mentioned earlier as well how it kind of depends on the company, but it also, a big advantage of a startup is as the startup grows, right? You grow with it. So,
Yeah, that's 100% is if there's a position that you want to have and say that you're starting, as a college hire or maybe somebody that's only a few years out of school, you're able to grow with the company. So if there's a position you want as the company grows, you can, talk about that with, your leaders in the company and be like, "Hey, I really want to do this thing as we grow, or I really want to take on this initiative." And so there's absolutely, people that get promoted all the time that they're able to learn very, very quickly. And they have a great understanding of, where the organization was. And maybe there was a process that didn't exist and they were able to build it, because they built it, they're the perfect person to manage a team that does it. So it's a great opportunity to grow with the organization and to find a role or make a role that opportunity may not exist at other companies.
gotcha. And what is the average salary for somebody who moves through a startup, right? So maybe, from coming in to some more managerial positions or after some time with the startup. And you can just provide me with the range, broadly from what you've seen, not only at Fox, but just other startups as well.
Yeah, it really depends on the position. I'll say across the board, one thing that people should be aware of is usually at a startup, you're going to take less money just because there might be less cash available. Every dollar really needs to go far. But the trade-off is that, as we talked about before, is that if this startup is really successful, the type of equity that people are going to receive could be, life-changing. That as
Yeah,
we talked about any of these startups before, I think there's this legendary story of a graffiti artist that went at Facebook and instead of receiving cash, he received equity compensation, and like years later became a millionaire just for doing his craft and painting some great art on the wall. And so that's the trade-off, and that's what most startups are going to offer is the range is going to be comparable to what you might have at a different company, and really everything from engineers, you're going to follow your normal engineering, salary compensation range, but you might be at the low end of it with the possibility to grow quickly, to grow more, and to have that equity trade-off.
gotcha. And, Kevin, in your opinion, obviously, like some people, you said there's kind of a lot of people coming in, there's a lot of growth, and I'm assuming there's a lot of turnover as well, for any given startup. And when people leave a startup, right, is there a field that they go into next typically, or work that they are very capable to do after, for good or for bad, right? Like if leaving for good reason or for bad, are there any themes, or can people jump into anything after being in a startup?
People can really jump into anything. I think a common theme is they're going to jump into the next startup, and you'll see that certain people really like how nimble startups are, the number of hats they get to wear, the number of like change in a very dynamic environment that might not be present, once the company has, made it to be a Fortune 500 company or has been acquired by a larger company. And so generally what you'll see is people that have the startup bug, they'll, leave for another startup or something like that. But there's also other opportunities of, working at a startup because you get to wear so many different hats and do so many different things. You really get to see how to build something. And that's a great skill set that you can bring to any organization that is building something new, or maybe they have processes they don't like, that they can bring in somebody with that startup experience that knows, backwards and forwards how to build something from scratch, which is a great skill set.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kevin, I know I've asked you this question before, but maybe you could, if you give us the same answer, that's absolutely gold still. But maybe you can shed some startup light on it as well. And it's, what would you tell your younger self when you were at the beginning of your career, now knowing that you're at this like startup that is exploding and growing a lot?
Yeah, I think telling my younger self the advice I'd give is thankfully what I followed, but didn't realize it at the time is like it's really important to obtain mastery over something or obtain a really, really great skill. So many people might be starting at an organization and asking, like, what are you going to give me or what can I get from this position? I think a better question to ask is, what can I provide? How can I add value? How can I make this company the next big whatever, the next big thing?
Mm,
And so I'd be telling my younger self, like, get really, really good at something that a lot of other people aren't good at or don't have a skill, because that way, yeah, I'm able to have such an advantage because of the skills that I've gained and provide a ton of value to, whatever organization I would be at. And for startups, that's absolutely the case, that if you're a leader or if you're really great at, whatever you're studying or whatever you're doing, that startup's going to have a position for you.
awesome. And, Kevin, where can people follow along with your work and also with Fox Robotics?
Yeah. So I think the best place is on LinkedIn for both. If you look for Fox Robotics, we're a robotics company based in Austin, Texas. So you can look for us there, and that's the same for me as well. You can look for me on LinkedIn and follow along with everything that's going on.
Awesome. And Kevin, anything else that you didn't get to say? Maybe something else about Fox Robotics or why you love it so much, and any like kind of like outplug that you would like, a listener who's maybe interested in the startup world and has like a business background and they're just kind of, really thinking about being in the startup.
Yeah, I think that every great company at the beginning was a startup, and it needed great people to get there. And so if you want to be a part of the next big cool thing, whatever is happening, a startup is a great way to do that. And it doesn't have to be just in, San Francisco or Austin or New York. Like, there's a lot of great things happening anywhere. And the barrier to entry is so low now, especially with AI. Like, you can have Chat GPT and, who knows what other AI is going to be developed in the next 5 years to do a lot of the work for you. So if you have a great idea, if you want to start your own company, or if you want to, join one that's just kicking off, it's a great time to be a part of a startup.
Absolutely. Gotcha. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for joining us again. Really appreciated you talking about the startup. And I think this is a field that obviously is going to become more relevant as more people like look into more of these like cool opportunities in the startup world.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks, Joaquin. It was great to be here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kevin.
You just got one episode closer to learning about the world of jobs out there. To explore the rest of our career categories and find your best fit, go to jobdictionary.com to sign up for the beta users waitlist. Then subscribe here to find the next episodes coming out this week. And as always, drop us a comment, review, or message to let us know how we can better attune our episodes to your specific needs. Follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, X, Threads, Pinterest, and wherever else you're on socials to go get our short, snappy preview reels that expose you to new job options every day. Because here at Job Dictionary, we believe your big aha moment can be just one scroll away. Go check it out and get out there. Cheers!